Welcome back. This is Foundation, and I am Lord Bara. The town is growing. Let's start with some housekeeping. Villagers seem happy. Everything seems to be working well. Money's flowing. That's always good. I do have a plan, believe it or not. I'm going to start building some fortifications, some city walls. That means looking in the kingdom's technology. Ooh. You know what? I can't actually add any more taxis. I will have the Great Hall though. And the tavern. That's good. But look, I have 0 technology that I can unlock in Kingdom. Well, I haven't built any castle structures whatsoever, so I need to do something about that, don't I? Start building. Pull my finger out. Not my finger, obviously. Well, I want to tidy up a few things in the town first, but I'm going to just get some prospecting going in the meantime. See what the bailiff comes up with. But there's some areas in the town that need a little bit more thought. These housing clusters, I'm going to revisit them again and again. I'm happy with 1 or 2 of them, but the rest of them, they're all a bit random. They need some work. So considering things are going so well and I'm overproducing on so many of the basic ingredients like wheat, milk, some stone as well. I'm gonna start putting some additional production buildings down. Another hop farm, which is why I put 2 new farms down, wheat farms. Hop farms require wheat. No, they don't. I'm talking rubbish. They don't require wheat at all. The hop farm doesn't require wheat, it just grows hops. The brewer requires wheat and hop to make beer. Let's just let this grass regenerate here, see if I can get another house to spawn, maybe 2, we'll see. This is the area where I'm going to build city walls between these 2 mining areas. I'll just get the woodcutters to clear a path out there for later, much later. Definitely overproducing on wood and stone. You can never have too much milk. You actually can't have too much milk in this game. I think that should be enough for now. Get some extra production in. That'll start making more money, which I'm going to need, because if I start building a fort here, that's going to cost money. Forts cost money. All of the monuments cost money, but you don't really get anything out of the forts at the moment, not in this current build. What do you make? Swords? Swords. That's what you can make from forts. And to be fair, can't really make that much money out of swords unless you've got tons and tons of iron. Let's hope the prospecting helps with that. Anyway, what do we have? There's 3 functions to the fort currently. You've got kind of the main part of the building, which needs to have a roof. And then you've got barracks and training grounds. Oh, you've also got treasury, of course. But those 3 buildings, those 3 pointy roofed buildings connecting to that mining area, those are the barracks, and that is more than enough. About 50 soldiers or something can be housed in there. What I like to do is, the rest of it will just be a little bit of training grounds, and the rest of it will just be treasury. Make use of it. But I like to have a little area where people are forced to walk through, kind of like a gatehouse, courtyard. Where visitors will have to be funneled through, give the impression that they're being checked, potentially by city guards. I know it doesn't actually happen, but I can imagine, can't I? That's what happens in Bara Town. We've got strict border control. The early morning sun sliced through the narrow window of the butcher's shop, casting a muted light across the rough-hewn wooden counter. The scent of curing meats hung in the cool air, mingling with the metallic bite of blood from that morning's slaughter. Claude stood behind the counter, his broad shoulders hunched as he sharpened a chipped old cleaver in desperate need of replacement. The rhythmic scrape of stone against steel, the only sound in the cramped room. Each stroke of the blade seemed a warning, a promise of things soon to come. Across the shop, a younger, slimmer man was trimming fat from a hanging carcass. His movements were quick and neat and deft. The air was thick, heavy with the unspoken rancor that had grown between the 2 brothers since their father's death. Claude barely glanced at Polo, but when he did, it was with eyes hard as flint, his expression betraying no warmth or familiarity. Claude remembered a day from long ago, a time when they were both just boys, back when the fields outside Bara were their playground and they had only each other. Polo had always been small for his age, and the village boys, rough and eager to prove themselves, had cornered him near the riverbank. Claude still could picture it, the way Polo had stood there, knees trembling, as the boys shoved him into the mud, laughing at his tears. Claude had arrived just in time. Without hesitation, he had waded through the group, blackened 2 of the boys' eyes in the process, grabbed Polo by the arm and dragged him out of the muck. He remembered the look of relief on Polo's face, the way his brother had clung to him as they made their way home, covered in filth but unbroken. Claude had thrown an arm around his shoulders and whispered words of comfort, telling him that he'd always be there to protect him, no matter what. But those days felt distant now. Their shared inheritance occurred neither of them could escape. Claude had been the elder, The butchery should have been his, wholly and without question. It was a man's right, passed down from father to eldest son. But their father had seen things differently, dividing the shop equally between them upon his death. A slight that Claude could never forgive. Every day since then had been a struggle, not just to keep the shop running, but to endure Polo's presence, which reeked of stale ale and regret. Polo's mottled cheeks and bloodshot eyes served as constant reminder of nights spent drowning his sorrows at the prancing boar, and Claude could hardly stand the thought of his brother squandering their legacy. The bell on the butchery door rang out softly, pulling Claude from his thoughts. He straightened, his battered cleaver poised mid-sharpen. Polo, too, paused in his work, the knife in his hand stilling over the half-carved carcass. The familiar sound of boots scraping against the stone floor echoed in the small space, and both brothers turned towards the entrance. In the doorway stood a man, as wiry as a winter tree, his sharp eyes scanning the shop with cold efficiency. He held a ledger tucked beneath one arm, and as he stepped inside, he noted the way the light glinted off the blood-slicked floor and the hanging carcasses that swayed slightly in the still air. The scent of curing meat mingled with a faint odour of alcohol, though he couldn't say exactly what. The tax collector's gaze flicked to Claude, who stood behind the counter, his posture tense, and then to Polo's ruddy cheeks. He was here to collect Lord Bara's dues, and approached the counter with deliberate steps, his tone as indifferent as ever, masking the judgment that mingled in his eyes. Claude forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Morning," he muttered, setting down his cleaver with a heavy thud. The tax collector nodded. The pleasantries over, his attention turned immediately to the matter at hand. From the corner of his eye, Claude caught Polo fidgeting, wiping his hands on his apron. He was reminded of a time when they were boys, making a delivery to the manor with their father. Polo had been so nervous, nearly dropping the basket of freshly butchered meats as he stumbled over his words in front of the nobleman. Even then, Polo had been quieter, always hesitant in matters of business. The tax collector cleared his throat, flipping open the ledger. "I trust you have it ready," he said, his voice dry and detached. Claude gestured, turning to the drawer beneath the counter. His fingers fumbled with the handle, his movements slower than usual. A knot of anxiety formed in his chest as he braced himself for what awaited him inside. The drawer creaked open, revealing a scant pile of coins, scattered and meagre. Claude's lips thinned as he stepped aside, letting the tax collector lean in to inspect the contents. The man's eyes narrowed, his gaze sweeping over the coins with practiced precision. "Well, that's unfortunate," the tax collector said, his tone neutral. He didn't even look at Claude as he spoke, his eyes fixed on his ledger, where he began to make a note. When he finished, he looked up. Something sharper now, an edge of warning that hadn't been there before. He closed the ledger with a sharp snap and gave Claude a hard, measuring look. "I'll return in 2 days," he said, his voice low but firm, leaving no room for debate. "And I won't be alone." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken threat. Without waiting for response, he turned and slipped out the door. The bell, this time, knelled as it rang. Claude slammed the door shut with a resounding crack. His teeth gritted. "What were you thinking?" he spat, his voice rising with every word. "It wasn't like this yesterday morning, Polo. Where's the money?" Polo flinched, his back pressed against the carcass he'd been trimming. I, he stammered, his words fumbling as he searched for an explanation, his eyes darting towards a half-drunk bottle of mead. "I what?" Claude's voice boomed, cutting Polo off. "What exactly did you think, Polo? The tax collector wouldn't notice we're short?" Polo's lips trembled. "I didn't think he'd be in today." "You don't think at all. That's the problem." Claude's hand slammed down on the counter, his face twisted in fury. "You never think." The words hit Polo like a blow. But before he could respond, Claude was already storming towards him, his broad frame casting a shadow over the younger brother. "You're useless," he snarled. "I should never have had to share this shop with you. Father should have known better." Polo's face crumpled, his hands trembling as he backed away. "Claude, please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'll make it right." Claude shoved him hard. Polo stumbled back, his feet slipping on the blood-slicked floor, and before he knew it, he was on the ground, looking up at his brother's towering figure. His chest heaved with ragged breaths, and tears welled up in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Claude." Claude's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Polo scrambled up to his feet and bolted towards the door. He nearly tripped in his haste, but he didn't stop. His breath came in short, panicked bursts as he fled the shop, tears streaming down his face. The streets of Bara blurred around Polo as he ran, his mind a swirl of shame and anger. He hadn't meant for this to happen. He hadn't meant for any of it to go wrong. He cursed the tax collector, and he cursed the butcher's shop for driving a wedge between them. His feet carried him to the blacksmith's forge, where the heat of the furnace and the smell of coal greeted him. The hammering sound of metal and metal rang through the air, and Polo's breath caught as he spotted the cleaver, gleaming and newly forged, resting on the anvil. The blacksmith himself, a hulking man with soot-streaked arms, looked up from his work. He sat down his hammer, eyeing Polo with concern. "You all right, lad?" he asked, his deep voice rumbling through the forge. But Polo couldn't speak. His eyes were fixed on the cleaver, a gift he had commissioned for Claude, made with the money he should have saved for the tax collector. His heart clenched painfully in his chest. The cleaver had been meant as a peace offering, a way to mend the broken bond between them, a way to show that despite everything, he still cared. "I'm sorry," Polo whispered, his voice cracking. He wiped at his face with the back of his sleeve, his tears smudging the grime on his skin. "I'm so sorry." Well, that's all I've got time for today, I'm afraid. So, if you have been, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. This has been Foundation, and I've been Lord Bara.